one of the reasons why we enjoy so much working with the financial services and the business of advice industry is we believe that you are on a new frontier, a whole new enterprise of helping people navigate longevity. No one owns the space, if you will. No business, no industry currently owns the space of how do we live longer, better, and how do we navigate the complexities, if you will, of living every day closer to 100 years.
This podcast is for advisor use only and not to be distributed to the public. The Wealth Consulting Group is an SEC registered investment advisor, and the opinions voiced and contents in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. The economic forecasts set forth in this material may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful.
Welcome to today's episode of The Bull of Wall Street. I'm excited because I've got non-markets people on the call with me today, or on podcast with me today, not talking about which way stocks are moving or whatever. But this is something that's near and dear to my heart. And again, my name is Jimmy Lee. I'm the CEO of the Wealth Consulting Group. We appreciate all the people that listen and watch to our different podcasts that we put out once a week. And today we're going to be talking about a subject that matters to all of us, and especially for all the financial advisors that may listen and watch this episode, things that we need to know to help our clients or even our own families about the subject of aging. And I'm actually at my mother's home, who's in her 80s, recording this because my father passed away this year. And I'm dealing with a lot of the same stuff that we're going to be talking about today. And so even people with resources financially, we need education. And it's an important topic. So today with me, we've got on John Diehl, who is a Senior Vice President of Applied Insights for Hartford Funds. And I want to do a shout out for Matt Montague, who's the person that we work with at our firm currently with Hartford Funds. We've had a long-standing relationship with Hartford Funds, and so we really appreciate the relationship that we have with y'all. And I wanted to ask you, John, about your relationship with Dr. Joseph Coughlin, who's the director of the MIT AgeLab. And I know he goes by Dr. Joe. Dr. Joe, I've seen a lot of your videos by now of the last 24 hours getting prepped for this. And I love listening to all of your content. And I know you two are fast friends from what Matt's told me about your relationship. But I wanted to ask you, John, why you were so interested in your company in developing this relationship with Dr. Joe and MIT AgeLab.
So, Jimmy, you say that we're friends. Joe will probably deny it, but the fact of the matter is that we've worked very closely together over the past 25 years or so, studying everything outside of direct investing in financial services, because we know as an aging client, money is important, but money isn't everything. And so let me take you back, Jimmy, a few years back to the early 2000s. And Joe can talk a little bit more about the founding of the AgeLab, but the Hartford, the big insurance company in Hartford, Connecticut, had a relationship with the MIT. They were actually one of the founding members of the MIT AgeLab because the Hartford was and still is the auto insurer of the AARP. And back in the late 1990s, the folks of the Hartford began to see a trend that aging and auto accidents were kind of running in parallel. And so the auto insurance world was really the first genesis, if you will, of our interaction with MIT and Dr. Joe and the AgeLab. But probably 3 or 4 years after that initial foray, the Hartford hired some consultants to talk with us about what the future of wealth management looked like. And I'll credit those consultants for saying that the future of wealth management wasn't solely about product, right? Everybody will have product. Your product has to perform well, be it mutual funds, annuities, life insurance, whatever it is. But there's a whole different field that needs to be looked at. And by the way, you already have a relationship with the AgeLab at MIT where you're looking at auto insurance. Why aren't you using it to study longevity planning, issues like elder care, issues like driving and transportation, issues like many other things connected simply with the fact that we're living longer. And we began to build back then a body of research and a library of presentations in conjunction with Dr. Joe and his team at the AgeLab that we could use both with financial professionals like yourself, Jimmy, but probably more importantly, for you to use with your clients and to help educate clients about what it meant to grow older today in the United States, the decisions, the challenges, the opportunities that we'd have in front of us. And so we leveraged our relationship with MIT to help us see around those corners, if you will, to make that advisor even more impactful to the client than simply the investment guru. But I'll let Joe say more because I probably forgot a whole bunch of what I should have said. So turn it back to you.
It's a good start, and we'll get to Dr. Joe here in a second, but I wanted to say that I think financial advisors, we are uniquely positioned to be able to provide education and this type of information in a non-threatening way to people, right? Especially our clients, where we talk to them about their money and about a lot of confidential things related to family and issues with their health. And so we thank you for the efforts for all these years that you've taken at Hartford Funds to do this. Dr. Joe, how did the MIT AgeLab get started, and what's the why the foundation of why you do what you do?
Well, every company likes a good origin story. So two things before I tell what the AgeLab is. Say hi to John, but Jimmy, thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry so much to hear about your dad over the past year. That no matter how old you are, you're still someone's little boy or a little girl. So thank you for having me here. The second thing I wanted to mention before I talk about the AgeLab, though, is something that John gave me a great segue on, and Jimmy, what you just said. One of the reasons why we enjoy so much working with the financial services and the business of advice industry is we believe that you are on a new frontier, a whole new enterprise of helping people navigate longevity. No one owns the space, if you will. No business, no industry currently owns the space of how do we live longer, better, and how do we navigate the complexities, if you will, of living every day closer to 100 years. And so we can get into that in a little bit on those various domains. But it's exciting to talk to all of you because I think you've got the next 3 to 5 years to see whether financial advice will turn into longevity planning. So the AgeLab, Jimmy, you asked about it. So John gave you a really good heads up. We started in an issue that is trapped somewhere between humor and horror, that is older drivers. And we didn't want to ask, how many birthdays have to accumulate before you become a problem, a threat, a risk, whatever. I'll tell you, I'll use the Cliff Notes, and if you know what Cliff Notes are, that tells me exactly how old you are, that birthdays do not kill, health conditions do. And so what we wanted to look at is how do we rethink the technology in the vehicle? How do we make the car safer, seamless to continue mobility? And we can come back to this in a little bit, but one of the things that advisors never think about in their discussions on the future of retirement planning or longevity, they never talk about transportation. And yet, if you look at the Bureau of Labor statistics, transportation is the second largest cost for a couple over age 65. The first one is housing, second is transportation, third is healthcare. So immediately everyone goes to healthcare, and it's there, but it's not as high as transportation. But we started in transportation because, frankly, that was my original background. But we all of a sudden realized that, if you still had places to go and people to be, what's the infrastructure of living a longer, better life? And so we started building out the lab to say, okay, it's not just about being there. It's about where are you going to live? What are you going to do? How will you provide care? How do you plan, not financially, because your industry's already got that locked up. Not how do you just plan financially, but if you imagine it, older adulthood is about the same amount of time, we can visit this later, as it took you to go from, shall we say, birth to drinking age, 21 years old. So the AgeLab, we are based in the School of Engineering, but we draw across the School of Architecture and Planning, social sciences. So my team is 1/3 behavior and psychology, 1/3 engineering and data science, and another third, I'm not quite sure who these people are, social workers, gerontology. Just so you know, we do not hire any economists, 2 reasons. one, they depress the hell out of everyone. And secondly, they're the only profession that can get paid by being wrong more than half the time. So we try to keep them out. We're trying to invent, if you will, as our tagline suggests at the AgeLab, life tomorrow.
Well, we're going to get to that life tomorrow here in a second. I want to know more about that. And it's fascinating, the work that you guys do at MIT. I was fortunate enough to go to a meeting. One of my favorite meetings, investment meetings, was from a due diligence meeting with an investment firm that hosted it at MIT. And I got to go to one of your labs where I learned about where a student invented studying like a bird's bone structure in a scanner at MIT, how to build material that's in modern airplanes today, and/or they replicated the snout of a pig to find truffles, because I guess truffles cost more than gold at the time. Anyway, fascinating stuff. Work that you guys do over there. Unfortunately, I was not smart enough to be able to get to spend any time at MIT myself. But anyways, I think, all right, I did okay for now. But the topic of elder care and I want to get to longevity, because obviously there's a lot of this stuff is around longevity. People are living longer. People want to live longer. There's a lot of advancements in healthcare, and hopefully with AI, maybe that'll even move this needle even faster. But there's the conference in Las Vegas the last few years. It's a big longevity conference, and I went to it the last 2 years, so I'm personally interested in the subject. And it's amazing, all the stuff that was there that I saw. It was overwhelming. But, you guys study elder care. Can you talk a little bit about just the insights and the trends and maybe some tips or tricks that we can all learn for ourselves to help our friends and families and clients? And maybe that can go into this life of tomorrow or life tomorrow.
Yeah. So, John, you want to go or?
Well, I'll just start by, Jimmy, sharing this observation with you. And I'm sure Joe has seen this as well. My team and I with Hartford Funds will conduct probably 2,000 client meetings in any given year. So we get to see the reactions to people. We get to hear the stories, so on and so forth. When we talk about elder care, when we talk about many areas of longevity, but specifically elder care, I'll just share this with you. It's very hard for us to envision ourselves not at age 40, 50, or 60, but at ages 75, 80, or 90. But we're very quick to see the aspects of aging in other people, right? So when we present some of the findings that Joe will talk about in a second around trends in elder care, it's oftentimes people coming up to us after the meeting saying, I can't believe you just said that. Let me tell you about what it's been like taking care of mom or dad, right? So, and it's a very emotional topic. But because it's so emotional, I think it's very difficult for us to see it in ourselves. What we do see, though, is that once we start seeing it in others, it takes a little bit of time, but soon we start thinking about, boy, if there's anything that I could do to make it easier on my family, if there are things I should be thinking about, that seems to be the impetus, the genesis. Joe and I talk a lot about this. It's especially important for financial professionals. It's not necessarily rational thought that causes people to make investment decisions. It's emotion that puts money in motion. The power of emotion to say, I just lived through something. It's on the top of my mind. I know I need to talk to someone about it, but I don't know who and I don't know how. So with that as a preface, I think sometimes if we address the family network when we're talking about these issues, like what I'll say to client audiences is that, look, maybe I'll say some things that you've already thought about. It may affirm decisions you've already made. It may plant a new seed. But here's how I want to challenge you. I want you to think not just about yourself, but others in your social network, parents, siblings, friends. And that seems to broaden the thinking a little bit. So with that, Joe, I'll turn it over to you just to talk about the state of elder care today and what you're all seeing at the lab.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we should probably clarify is what do we mean by elder care or caregiving? So I'm going to give everyone kind of a framework that they might want to even give as a structure when they talk to their clients. But I'm going to put something out there that may cause a little bit of, shall we say, consternation, which is if you're not talking about caregiving, you're losing and leaving a tremendous, not as just as John said, an emotional issue, but a universal issue that every single family, whether you're someone who lives alone or have many family members you live with at a distance or in your home, this is one issue that everyone is going to experience. As Rosalind Carter said many years ago, caregiving is one of those things that at one point you will either be giving care or you will be receiving care. So if you're not talking about it, you're missing an amazing opportunity. So the first part about caregiving is it's common. So we're going to go 4 C's, if you will. Four, it's common and universal to all of us. The second thing is when we think about elder care, quite often people think, dad needs some help. He's about 1 foot out the door, one on a banana peel, and needs to be in senior housing. That's one part of caregiving, but think about it. Your clients, yourself, and the like, caregiving, as I like to say, compounds. It begins with something as simple as calling home, saying, hey, how you doing? How's it going? Then it starts to gradually move up. It's like, well, something needs fixing, an appliance or a roof needs repair. Can you help me out on that? And as, shall we say, people become more frail or less sure, or health conditions become more complex, suddenly you find yourself shopping with someone. Maybe you're substituting transportation. Then all of a sudden you start to getting into even more issues around medication compliance, taking them to the doctor. Essentially, a caregiver, all of a sudden, we have many that we're finding in the lab that are doing complicated things such as infusions and wound care at home. And then also at the far end, we start thinking about Alzheimer's, dementia, and the like. So when we think about caregiving, it is not universal. It compounds over time. And think about it as a level of effort that the family caregiver, often an individual, typically the first one is your partner, right, or your spouse, and then ultimately it often becomes your oldest adult daughter or daughter-in-law, if you will. But the third C I want you to think about is it's complex. It becomes very complex managing all those things, whether it's financial, whether it's health related. Can they stay in the home they're in? If you choose to move them, is it going to be complex to move in with you or complex to make a decision to move into senior housing overall? And finally, the one that gets closer to the business at hand, it becomes profoundly costly. And what we find is that 1 in 4 families are providing upwards of 29 hours per week to provide elder care. So that means time away from work, or choosing work that does not require travel, or choosing work that does not have a promotion associated with it. Largely women take time off of work, or they skip a job altogether and drop out of the workforce. So it's costly in terms of how much they spend. Some data suggests upwards of 300 plus per month. Some people add to their elder care budget for medication, grocery shopping, transportation, but it's also the opportunity cost that they pay. So elder care is not that simple thing we have in our mind. It is common, it compounds, it's complex, and ultimately it is costly.
Wow, and it's interesting for me particularly because I'm living through this myself, and it's just my brother and I, so there's no daughters in the family, but one of the reasons why we moved our parents here is because he's in the healthcare industry, so is his wife. And we moved the parents a few years back to be closer to them, to be able to provide better care than I could, traveling a lot in the work that I do back at home where we're all from. So anyway, but I will be taking my mom back to Las Vegas so she can go hit the casinos and play some machines later on in the next few days. Let's talk about longevity. It's this this word, or the concept of living longer or wanting to live longer and healthier. It seems like it's a trend for sure that has taken over the globe in some aspects, with all these new things, peptides and all these things that are going on today. But in terms of longevity, aging, the data and science behind it, and then now with AI, can you just talk about that overall as an industry, your take on it? I'm sure that a lot of the stuff that people do or spend money on is probably BS, but let's talk about that.
Joe, why don't you start? Talk a little bit about how longevity has changed over the years as we've looked at it.
Yeah, I was going to say that when we think about longevity, one of the things that comes as a shock to people is that 100 years ago, life expectancy did not even touch 50 years old. Think about that. We've gained upwards of 20, 30, some and some that are fortunate gained upwards of 4 decades of additional life. That's one heck of a longevity dividend, is the way we like to refer to it here in the lab. The challenge now is, how do you actually cash in that dividend? How do you actually use those years? And so, Jimmy, your question had an underlying assumption that I might be able to give you some secret sauce of how to live longer, if you will. Well, for the advisors out there, one of the things I want you to think about is that the correlation, I didn't say causation, but the correlation to living longer is not necessarily following doctor's orders or exercising or, John and I both grew up outside the Philadelphia area, where I believe that cheesesteak, scrapple, and tasty cakes are food groups. So don't ask me about nutrition guidance. But actually, the correlation to living a longer life is money and education. So the very nature, the very fact that your client has come to you with enough wealth to discuss with you, with enough efficacy and education to say, I need guidance, probably means that they're going to skew any actuarial table that you're going to get from the feds or any company. In fact, one of my colleagues here at the lab, Jim Paterba, the head of the National Bureau of Economic Research, did a back of the envelope study showing that MIT alums on average outlive the average life expectancy of an average American by 18 years. So
Wow.
one of the things we're looking at here is longevity is highly skewed. We've gained many decades. And here's the punchline. The fastest growing part of the population is 85 plus. And so as a result of looking at that, we now have to plan not retirement as we used to think about, as a short trip to Disney with the grandchildren, a little puttering around, maybe a cruise down a river or two, and then, a story that's basically between cruises and crutches. We're now looking at a life stage that is as long as all the other things that we had in earlier life.
And it's funny, Jimmy, because many Americans still base their view of what retirement will be like on what they observed in their parents and grandparents. So, Joe and I often talk about, when Del Webb opened the first senior living community, Sun City, in Sun City, Arizona, is January 1st, 1960. And back then, his critics said he was crazy if he thought that people were going to move from New York, Chicago, Seattle to the middle of the desert to live this close to one another so they could go swimming and play golf all day long. And fact of the matter was, the day it opened, there was a line of cars about 4 miles long waiting to get in. And the retirement of rest and relaxation and leisure was born. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but retirement was expected to last 5 to 7 years at that point, not 25 to 37 years. And therefore, what we find is that many of the new issues associated with this longevity dividend are in the area of social connection, filling that time. What am I going to do? 30 years is a long time to fill if we don't have a very good idea of what we're going to fill it with. And so these are a lot of the things that we talk about, something that many times financial professionals and even clients are unaware of, is the importance of social interaction in aging. And so being able to encourage your clients in terms of, what are they getting involved with? What are they having fun with? Are they challenging themselves? Are they intentionally putting themselves in places to meet new people? These are the different questions that longevity is causing. And I'll go back to one issue. Joe mentioned it for a second. That the old mantra used to be, I'm going to buy my house, raise my family. I'm going to stay in the house until they take me out in a pine box. It doesn't always work that easy. We know today the average American will move about 12 and a half times in their lifetime, and the majority of those moves will happen after age 60. You may decide to upsize, you may decide to downsize, you may decide to live closer to family, you may want to move away from family, you may need to live with family, you may need the care of a care community. And so the time to investigate these questions is not when it's time to be reactive. It's not when mom or dad falls and breaks a hip, and now we got to get all the siblings together and we have 3 weeks to make a decision. It's when we're healthy, we're in our 60s, we can evaluate options. We can talk to our family about, hey, if I ever couldn't be in my current home, here's where I'm thinking I'd like to be, rather than we're trying to move the decision point away from the moment of crisis. That's what a lot of our education is about. So longevity itself is causing new opportunities, new challenges, and new questions, and new cause for discussion amongst families that we believe the financial professional, as you said earlier, is in a key position to stimulate some of these conversations.
And not necessarily to have the answer, but to ask the questions. And John made a great point. Del Webb did more than develop a development. He invented the way we all think about retirement today. I mean, pick up any brochure in any of the offices of the people that are listening right now, and I guarantee it's the same two people walking down the beach that have been walking down that beach for 50 or 60 years. Here's the problem. We are now living longer, but we have no natural narrative, no storyline to how to live effectively an entirely new life stage. Now, Jimmy, you may have heard this, and I know John and I have told this story many times. But are you ready to do a little bit of math? We'll get the group that's listening to do some simple math. I want you to think about this. From 0 to 21, from birth to drinking age, if it makes it easier to sum, is about 8,000 days. And from 21 years old to what many might call midlife crisis, 46, 47 years old, is about, be generous with your calculations, about 8,000 days. And then from 46, 47 to the Newtonian law of physics of retirement, 65, is about 8,000 days. But here's the thing. From 65, remember I said the fastest growing part of the population is 85 plus. From 65 to 85 and change is 8,000 days. So let's gently take childhood and move that off to the side, 0 to 21. That story that you can tell clients is a tool to get them to understand they are not planning for a brief trip on a cruise ship or going to be in crutches. They're planning for 1/3 of their adult life. And all the transitions that will be within that 1/3 could be as great or greater than the other thirds that they've already lived as an adult.
That's fascinating. So I'm glad you talked about the concept of those 8,000 days. And I've heard that, John, from some presentations that people that work for you have done for us and our clients. But, this concept of life tomorrow, Dr. Joe, I'm really looking forward to reading one of your books. So I will do your bio better justice as we have this podcast continue. But Dr. Joe is also an author and accomplished author. And this book is recommended in a lot of circles of business leadership. But the Longevity Economy book, and I know there's some other words to that title, but the Longevity Economy book, I like how you tie this into the social economic impacts and the infrastructure that we need in the United States or in the world in order to not just take advantage of it possibly for business opportunities, but to make sure that we do this properly for a big part of our population. So can you talk about that, the idea of life tomorrow, how things may change? I was going to wait to the end, but will your 8,000 days change? Can people actually live to 150, like some people are saying these days? But yeah.
What's fun is that not just surveys that we've done here at the AgeLab, but around the world, if you ask people if they want to live to 100, the vast majority say no, because they've got the image that living to 100 is shall we say, not going to be that great. So, are we going to live to 150? That's kind of, shall we say, outside my wheelhouse. There are a lot of people out there that are saying that if you can live another 10 years, you're going to live another 50 or 60, if you will, and maybe make it to 150. The whole premise around the AgeLab, frankly, and Life Tomorrow is, tell you what, get me to 100 good years, and then we'll renegotiate the contract. Because, if you think about it, we've not even learned how to cash in the longevity dividend that we now enjoy. So it's not just about time, it's about quality of life. Some say it's health span, and it's not even health span. It's what John was mentioning before, having social connection, having something to do. Not just having purpose. Purpose to me is kind of like way up there on the Maslow's pyramid, but mattering to other people, that what you do and why you're here matters to someone or something overall. So Life Tomorrow is about constructing that new narrative and the infrastructure overall. And so that's what we mean by Life Tomorrow. Transportation, housing, caregiving, longevity planning are the things that we need to put into place.
Jimmy, the way we also think about it is that, aging, lifespan is measured by the number of years, right? But aging is really primarily three three factors that are all available to us. One is your physical factor. How's your health? Do you have the health to be able to enjoy the things that you want? I know some of the longevity sciences are kind of focused in that area. That's great. I hope they make some breakthroughs. I hope we discover new things. But there are two other pieces. One is your finances, right? Do you have the money to be able to avail yourself of the care and the experiences and the things that you'd hope to do? And you're now stretching those portfolios over many more years. And then thirdly, the one we mentioned already, which everybody overlooks, are your social factors. How connected are you to family and friends? One of the best predictors of long-lived, healthy life is the depth and breadth of your friendship network, because friends do really important things for you as you age. They get you up off the couch, physically moving, giving you a place to go and a reason to be there. And secondly, they give you a reason to circle the date on the calendar, mental stimulation, things to look forward to. In fact, we know of research out there that says for someone that says they're frequently lonely, it's the physical equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of sedentary lifestyle, isolation. Again, we think of the person that says, I can't wait to retire because you know what I'm going to do? Lock myself in my room, watch my favorite cable TV news channel, and be paranoid about the world around us. That's not the way we want to live. So we get people thinking about all these factors. We're learning more about health and nutrition all the time. We know that we're constantly seeking financial education, but we also really need to think about the investment we're making in the social portfolio, if you will, as well.
We recently conducted research, and we're in our second year of doing this, that where we looked at 8 different dimensions of being prepared for a longer, better life. And one of them was social, caregiving, housing, community, the things that you would imagine would go into living a longer, better life. And out of a possible score of 100, America gets a 60. Think about that. And by the way, the good news for the advisors that are listening is that if you have an advisor, the point spread goes up about 6 to 7 points. Largely because I think one of the greatest value that financial advisors can provide today is not just financial security. That's shall we say, a level set, the cost of doing business, but being an agenda setter, helping me, as John mentioned earlier, to see around corners as an advisor, you've retired hundreds of times. I get to, shall we say, retire once. Jimmy, if I can, I don't want to take you off script, so to speak, but one of the things about the longevity revolution that we're talking about of living longer, as we've done here, we've naturally kind of transitioned into thinking about it means living longer, and therefore we focus more on older age. So there's some new thinking I'd love to introduce to you that I think that is important for the business of advice in prospecting the next generation and retaining who they have as clients. Aging and longevity has had 3 different waves of thinking over the last 20, 25 years. We started out by discovering an aging society. We talked about, people are getting older, we're living longer. And that kind of defined our lives into, well, if we're having an aging society, that's about caregiving, it's about health, it's about support. Frankly, it's about dependency and financial. Do we have enough money to live in old age? Not incorrect, just woefully incomplete. And then, and I'll take full blame and credit, my book, The Longevity Economy. Then we started defining, hey, wait a minute. This aging population, it's not just about need, but they make up the 3rd largest consumer buying power in the world after the GDP of the United States and China. This is where the money is in the 50-plus population. So it's an economy where products and services can be focused. But here's where I want you to think, and this is the new thinking. We have now moved from aging to economy to longevity society. Really what we're looking at is not just longer periods of life and longer retirement. That longer life is now rippling backwards. We now have people that are taking longer to become adults. We're staying home with our parents longer. We're not getting driver's licenses. We're not getting a partner. We're not moving out of the house. We're doing multiple careers before we settle down. We're delaying wealth accumulation. What I want everyone to think about is that longevity is a fundamental disruptor. It's not adding more time at the end of life. It has waved and caused ripples all the way through life. So when you start talking to people now, imagine this. The literature is now showing that adulthood doesn't begin at 18, not at 21, not even at a quarter century club at 25. Increasingly, it's 36 years old. Think about that if you're an employer. Think about that if you're wealth accumulation. Or scary enough, think about that if you're a parent.
Wow, that's amazing. I can only just start thinking about all the questions I might have on the impact of, of this longevity and how it's going to impact all different parts of our economy. And, just how we all, as humans, interact with each other also, right? In terms of how things might change. I know there are three concepts that you guys talk about, three questions that I want you to elaborate on: the light bulb, ice cream cones, and lunch. Can whoever wants to take that, go ahead. But can you guys talk about what that means?
John, once you take one, I'll take the next.
Okay, sure. So let's start with light bulbs, because we know that the majority of Americans say they're going to age in their own homes. But as we talked about earlier, Jimmy, that light bulb stands for the home that you intend to age in. And will that home be able to accommodate you, not just into your early 70s, but your 80s, perhaps 90s, or maybe beyond? And what we see is that there's now a spectrum of housing options available to us. So we should always be thinking about, if I weren't able to be here, where would I want to be next? Is the home that I'm living in even able to accommodate me? If we say we do want to age in our homes, how many of us spend 30 or 40 minutes even thinking about the adaptations or services that are going to make it necessary or going to be necessary for us to stay in that home? Jimmy, I could share with you the top 10 design changes for aging in place, things like level entryways, kitchen and bath improvements, storage within easy reach, all 10 meant to prevent one thing in the home. What is it?
The fall.
Falling. Because a fall can change the plan in a heartbeat. And so we need to be talking to our clients about, have they thought about investments in their home? Have they thought about where they will be next, right? There are specialists out there now in the home building industry that can evaluate homes to say, if you're thinking renovation, if you're thinking about staying in the home, here's some of the things that we should think about. As I mentioned already, the average American will move 12 and a half times. It's not as simple as staying in my home forever until they cart me out. There's often interim steps along the way. So oftentimes when I bring this up at our client workshops, you would be amazed, Jimmy, how many times clients will come up and say, I can't believe you just said that. Let me tell you about a conversation we just had last week. But since Joe is so remember, the light bulb, who's going to change your light bulbs, is all about the home that you intend to age in. I'll leave ice cream to Joe because I happen to know that he is an ice cream aficionado. So Joe, why don't you take that one?
It's kind of funny. That's how I was going to give an intro on that. Before we do that, Jimmy, though, I want to give everyone homework. Sorry, my day job is teaching, if you will. And the homework is a segue off of what John was saying. It's called an aging in place contractor. It's a certification from the National Association of Home Builders. I want every advisor right now that is watching us to do a speed dial online to try to identify 2 or 3 aging in place contractors so that when they have a client come in and say, hey, I'm not going to make the SEP payment or redoing the kitchen, it's not, gee, that's nice. And, yes, you have enough money to do it. It's, yes, have you thought about this? And have you thought about how you can make it so that it's not just a nice place to live, but a place that you can stay? This becomes part of building a longevity team, not simply a financial plan.
And remember, Jimmy, one thing I'll add to that, future value in our business is not simply about providing investment products. It's 2 additional things. And by the way, we do have to provide solid performance. That's why our clients came to us in the first place. But 2 additional things, and it relates to what Joe just said. Educate me and connect me to resources that can help. So by doing that little exercise, you'll start to build resources that you might say to a client, look, I can't give you a recommendation. I haven't used folks like this, but other people in my practice have used these contractors, or let me give you a place to start. Research a certified aging in place specialist that may be able to evaluate your home. They will remember the fact that you cared enough to suggest something that might help. So Joe, back to ice cream.
Yeah, people don't like to buy products. They don't like to buy services, much to the dismay of the advisors on the call, perhaps. What they want to buy is solutions. And just to give you a metaphor, Best Buy multiplied their television sales when they realized that people did not want to buy new TVs. What they were wanting to do was to watch TV. So when they invented Geek Squad to install the TV, that was a solution to the, shall we say, the job of watching TV. So an advisor who can get me closer to what it is I really want to do, which is not just to have a robust checkbook, but to pay for all the things I need, that's an advisor you keep and one you talk about. All right, so ice cream, my favorite topic of the day, if you will. So the question I want people to think about, and they can even ask their clients, and the clients may get a smile or give them a weird look. How will you get an ice cream cone? It's a two-dimension question. The first one is, well, I'll set it up. For me, it's a hot summer night. You can hear the peepers out. I want an ice cream cone. Can I get there? Do I have access to it? I mentioned it a few minutes ago. Transportation is the second largest cost in retirement. But imagine this. Do you know that 70% of Americans who live that are over the age of 50 do not live where there's alternatives to transportation? They're not walking distance to an ice cream stand. They can't take public transportation. That's only one part of it. Access to the things like ice cream that bring you the little smiles. The dimension I bring ice cream about is not just transportation, but ask people not what they're going to want in retirement, what their legacy is. That's part of the discovery process. Do it, write it down. But ask them this: what are the little things that make you smile? What are the little joys? Do you have access to them? Have you thought about them? And how will you ensure that they're available to you in that long period of life called retirement?
So, Jimmy, one thing's kind of funny about this access that Joe just talked about. Look, longevity isn't usually a happy story for men, right? We know we don't live as long, arithmetically. But this topic of driving and access is actually really good for the guys who are listening, because, gentlemen, if you want to be the Casanova of your senior living community when you move in, there is one skill that you want to keep sharp as you age, and it's not dancing. It's driving. And if you can drive at night, rock star status, right? If you can give access to people who need it, all of a sudden, again, the social contingent kind of plays in there. Jimmy, who was the most popular kid in high school? Was the one that got the keys to mom and dad's car. We all piled in. They gave us access, maybe not to where we wanted to go, but we got to go somewhere. The same holds true at the other end of life. So that how will I get an ice cream cone is all about access.
So you're saying, John, I can make up for a really bad high school experience eventually in assisted living.
Exactly.
It's crazy, guys. I have personal stories about everything you just talked about. So literally, one of the reasons why I moved the parents here was that my dad was driving on the wrong side of the road, back at our home. That's probably one of the last days that he drove. Moved here. This house happens to be walking distance, literally across the street to a shopping center where there's a Munchies, which my mom would get for my father because he was not as mobile. And every single day, that was his favorite treat. And I'm struggling right now with, back up a little bit. The reason why my dad did pass, probably could have lived a little longer, is that he had a fall. And then now I'm thinking about, my mom's pretty mobile. She loves to walk, but this is a 2-story home where her bedroom's been upstairs. And is it net positive that, she's walking up and down and for the exercise element for it and everything versus the chances of a fall, which she's very careful. But these are all things that I know I'm not the only one, right? So this is like all of us deal with these things. And literally every single thing that you guys just said, we've had that experience in my own family. So let's get to the next one, lunch. Who wants to take that?
Go ahead, John.
So yeah, lunch we kind of touched on already, but I'll dig into it just a little bit deeper and Joe can elaborate. So lunch is all about who are you going to have lunch with, is all about your social network. We talked about the importance of it. One of the most important factors in aging is social connection. But Jimmy, here, as much as we had a laugh about the guys who are listening in the last topic, this one is one that men in particular need to pay attention to. We know that when women leave their primary place of employment, they oftentimes rebuild social networks much faster than their male counterparts. Women tend to be the chief connectors in the household. They're the COO of the family, if you will. And therefore, when they leave their primary place of employment, their role often comes to pulling family together, planning social events, so on and so forth. What we find with men is that when they leave the primary place of employment, they don't really realize how many of their social connections were at the workplace. They also don't realize how big of a part of their identity was absorbed in the workplace. And as a result, men are more likely to express those feelings of loneliness, isolation, boredom, and probably the biggest downside of the longevity dividend that Joe mentioned, the issue of depression. And so, as we talk about the importance of social connection, that Jimmy, as I said, we do so many of these client meetings. Invariably, you will see a woman in the crowd elbowing her spouse or significant other, saying, "See, I told you we need to go do this. We need to be involved with that," so on and so forth. I actually really agree with that, because who you're going to have lunch with doesn't mean we're going to have the lunch with the same people we've had it with for the last 10 to 15 years. What we find is that aging impacts the social network, because eventually our friends, if we're not refreshing the social network, we will find that that network will fade away, pass away, move away. And you don't want to be the last person standing. You may argue it beats the alternative. I would argue back, not if you've ever met someone that's lost all those around them that make life worth living. And so, Joe, I'll turn it back to you, in case I'm sure there's things I missed, but your thoughts on who will I have lunch with?
Well, also, and John, you and I and your team at Hartford Funds put together a great workbook to think about social connection. It's not just social connection, but do an audit, if you will, of your friends. Do you have, the fun friends to go to a game with, the movies, have a beer? Do you have a good friend? Statistically, it shows that we, in a lifetime, only have maybe 2 or 3 good friends. They're the ones that have your back when everything goes down. They're the ones that come to give you a ride to the hospital if need be at 2 o'clock in the morning. But to John's point about, friends change over a lifetime. There's a natural attrition of friendship. Do you have friends under development? That refreshing idea. Are you getting out and meeting new people, doing new activities, revisiting things like alumni clubs or the like? So yeah, keeping that social capital, if you will, as important as your wealth capital is about living longer and better.
Well, guys, I wanted to let our audience know a little bit more about Dr. Joe's background. So not only is he a teacher, advisor, speaker, author, 2 of his books, the one that I mentioned earlier, The Longevity Economy, has been recommended by CEO Reads as it's a bestseller and required reading. It's on the required reading list of Fortune 500 corporate boards and executive leadership at many companies. His new book, with an MIT AgeLab colleague, called Longevity Hubs, Regional Innovation for Global Aging, is one that was published, I think, in 2024. So I think for those of you that are interested, like myself, I think those would be 2 amazing reads. Get a little bit more insight. Dr. Joe is also a contributor to Forbes and writes regularly for the Wall Street Journal, Market Watch. He's been on CNBC, Bloomberg. Anyway, very accomplished young man. One of the chapters in your first book, The Longevity Economies, is of particular interest to me and our firm. The future is female. We have a lot of female advisors that work alongside at WCG, and we service a lot of women investors. We have a particular interest in helping women investors, recent divorcees, etc., entrepreneurs. Can you talk about that? The future is female. What does that mean?
Well, my wife likes to say that I do the science of the obvious, because it was nice of me to acknowledge 51% of the population. But, you heard John a moment ago talk about, that she's the chief connector socially. The future is female because longevity, and I'm not saying it's correct, I'm just saying it's worked out this way. Women basically are the ones who are hacking longevity. They are the chief caregiver. After your spouse, partner, whatever, it's your oldest adult daughter who's likely to be picking up all the caregiving related issues. She's the chief consumer officer. 80 cents and 90 cents on the dollar of every healthcare decision is made by a woman. And by the way, for a number of years, I sat on Daimler's advisory board. We didn't really care about who bought cars in general. What we wanted to know is who bought luxury cars. And guess what? That number goes up to the 80th percentile. It's either directly influenced or purchased by a woman. And by the way, she now has more education than all fields but engineering and is likely to eclipse that. And this is where it affects advice. She is your number one either competitor or referral. She's the one who's going online to Google, to Chat GBT or Claude, whatever your AI of choice is. She is 3 times more likely to do online research for a friend on health, wealth, housing, and caregiving than a man is. So the future is female because she has taken up the role of the jobs of all of these things. And therefore, she's the one who knows best exactly what it's likely to be as we age and live longer. And that's why advisors need to broaden their discussions. Look, men and women both want to talk about how much money do I need? Will I be secure? But that's a very narrow definition. It's a very narrow bracket. Women from a young age want to know who's going to provide care. Where am I going to live? What am I going to do with the 40-year-old boy that's in the basement still playing video games? Oh, by the way, my husband's not looking so good. Or given the divorce rate's the highest amongst the 50 plus, after he leaves, what's next for me? And by the way, the second largest group of people starting new businesses are women over the age of 50. So start asking yourself, if you're an advisory firm, next time you have a client seminar, you're going to talk about Medicare Advantage plans. Are you going to talk about 401k flip overs, Social Security? Okay, that's fine. But maybe what you should be adding to your script is discussions on caregiving, discussing on new businesses after the age of 50, career transitions. What's next for me? Those are profoundly female, but they get the attention of everyone.
Well, we can all
Jimmy,
certainly go ahead, John.
I would say the same thing. What we find, and where the research with Dr. Joe has helped us understand, is that women are, and I say this generally speaking, but generally women are deeper researchers. And one of the reasons why is Dr. Joe and his colleagues say that their decision box is broader, meaning that when men consider financial decisions, oftentimes we're thinking about numero uno, perhaps a spouse or significant other, and maybe adult children. Oftentimes she's thinking definitely about herself, definitely about her spouse, definitely about adult children, but oftentimes others are going to be impacted by the decision that she's about to make: parents, siblings, friends. And so the concern about making the right decision, right, so as not to jeopardize the future of any of those involved, it seems to be a deeper emotional concern. And so for a financial advisor looking to better connect with the person that may be managing those family assets years into the future, or the young female client who is very established economically coming into their office for the first time, one of the most important things to understand is the number one reason why people do business with us is not for all the diplomas on our wall and our accomplishments and all the lists that we've made. It's because they look at us and say, you know why we do business? Because you get me. You understand me. You understand my circumstance. You've spoken the language. You have dealt with people. Like in my situation, I feel like you can understand me and help me. And so becoming a little bit versed in these very emotional topics, which are very much at the forefront of her agenda, are really important in communicating to her that our practice is able to help you and having her feel comfortable with that.
Well, I think we all know that women have a much higher EQ than us men. And so I think I wanted to talk about AI next. And so we are being told in the financial advice space that maybe our jobs are protected from AI, but boy, you better double down on the relational side of your business and the EQ side, right? So I think actually this is a very timely topic for us as advisors to be able to protect our margins and provide more value outside of the returns that too many advisors, I think, focus on only. And so can we talk about that a little bit with AI? How do you guys feel about AI and how it's going to affect the subject we're talking about, whether it's, the whole healthcare industry, and what's your guys' view on it? Let's riff about it a little bit.
Joe, you're sitting in the catbird seat at MIT. Tell us about AI.
It's funny. These days, you can't be in any meeting without AI coming up or recording your meeting, so to speak. So look, AI, we can see a lot by looking, as Yogi Berra would say. AI is going to disrupt every single profession. I don't care who you are. I mean, I saw an article the other day that even clergy, which they thought was the most protected profession, is now going to be disrupted, if you will, by AI. What I would suggest is that advisors, financial professionals of all stripes, should start thinking about the fact that currency of your business actually might be products and planning. That's how you keep the lights on. But your business is going to be about conversations. And so far, AI does not have the ability to do that. That profoundly human, profoundly personal conversation about things that I care about and helping me see things I hadn't thought about. Just to give you kind of just a few case studies of where things are going. And John and I did some work on this over the years. We thought that the internet was going to kill the travel advisor, or the travel agent. And indeed, it did knock out a good chunk of the people that were just selling tickets or just selling tours. But guess what? We went from travel agent to now travel advisors, a whole character job description now, where they are now trying to personalize and know enough about you and your family to customize and curate your trip. There's fewer of them, but they're now making more money than ever because of what they did is they delegated transaction to the algorithm. One more example, doctors, they're not immune to AI as well. But guess what we're finding? At least those who have the education and money, they're flocking to concierge medicine because algorithms may give you information. They may help you with medication. They may give you better diagnostics. But people are paying for that immediate response and that personal response. So what I would say to advisors out there, let the algorithm do the math. Let them do the model portfolios. Let it do the algorithm that many of us were trained to do. We took pride in our quantitative acumen. Well, guess what? If it's quantitative, I can automate it, do it faster, cheaper, probably more accurate. The business today and tomorrow is to be profoundly personal.
Jimmy, there was an editorial published in the New York Times that I shared with Joe when I first saw it. I think it came out in May of 2026. The title of it was, I'm a doctor, here's what AI cannot do. And as I read it, just talking about how AI will do a wonderful job putting together, theses about that average 86-year-old with heart condition sitting in front of you. But it doesn't personalize it to the actual person sitting in front of you. There's something to be gained from the years of experience that we have in knowing someone. Again, knowing where they came from, knowing their fears, not only what their fears are, but why those fears are there or why they're excited about given ideas, and then matching the way we manage financially their lives with that aspect. So another analogy that Joe and I often talk about is that as you get older, money becomes more like a utility. And when I say that, I mean, we walk into the kitchen in the morning, we flip the light switch on. We don't look at the light and go, I wonder if that's coal-fired, nuclear, hydro. We just want the light to come on, right? It's what the energy can do that gets us excited. And so I think the advisor of the future, I lament sometimes that we're getting trapped in this narrative of it's us versus AI. The successful advisor of the future is going to learn how to integrate AI into their practice to do exactly what Joe said. Just like physicians who are now using AI to read radiological scans better than the human eye can, they're using that additional time to spend more time in front of the client, talking about the implementation of the health plan, the monitoring of the health plan, putting it in terms that the individual in front of them can understand and maybe even get a little bit enthusiastic about. And so that's where we see it coming. It's a combination of the two, being able to ask the right prompts, being able to, and that's strictly from the advisor standpoint. I think Joe could probably riff a little bit about how AI is going to actually change the way we age in terms of products and services. But for the advisor themselves, I think what Joe said right on the money. And what you said, Jimmy, that EQ piece is going to be an extremely important differentiator.
Yeah, the idea that AI can provide endless content. What an advisor can do, what a human can do, is to provide context. Can see little nuances of how one spouse looked at the other when they got a piece of news, or the reaction, who dominates the conversation, who doesn't. So far, AI is not there.
One of my favorite questions I learned long ago to ask clients in the job that I have is to ask them what's most important to them about their money, and not stop with their first answer, that first layer, until you really get down to what's really important, what's it supposed to do for you, right? And that is actually different for lots of people when you get beyond like just having enough not to run out, right? So, John, I'm going to ask you the last question about what Hartford Funds does and your team to help advisors that are not as familiar with your resources as I am. But before we get there, Dr. Joe, John, what did we miss? What are some of the things that might be top of mind for you on this subject, whether it's something that's new that you're researching, Joe, or John, something that's a new initiative on your end? Did we miss anything that you think the audience should be hearing?
Not necessarily that we were missing, but something I just want to reinforce. I truly believe that the profession of advice is on a whole new frontier of helping us plan for longevity, to be longevity planners, not only financial or retirement planners. And I think we've got a few years to be able to develop that. And so to help me as a client see around corners, the money is the cost of doing business, but the value is going to be providing me on what is my next. And I guess the last thing is kind of self-promotional is that a lot of where I put a lot of my initial thinking is on LinkedIn at Dr. Joe Coughlin. So if you're terminally bored, find me there.
Jimmy, from my standpoint, what I and my team have done for the past 2+ decades is we take the research from Dr. Joe and his team, as well as other subject matter experts. I've been a certified financial professional myself since 1991, which gives us the lens of the financial advisor and the financial client. So we can take the data and studies coming from MIT and work with MIT to massage that into workbooks, white papers, presentations that can be given to clients. We'll speak at training events for advisors to help them understand what this information means for them. But as I said, we'll do about 2,000 client meetings a year. And Jimmy, let me give you a little analogy to end, which we use at most of the client events that we do, regardless of the topic, maybe some of the things we talked about today. Before we wrap up, I'll say to all the people in the room, hey, do me a favor. In conclusion, let's forget for a second that you came here tonight to talk about investing, retirement, MIT, longevity, all that stuff. Let's instead pretend that there is a jigsaw puzzle sitting in front of each of you. And if that were the case, and I asked you to put the puzzle together, what would you say is the most important first step? And clients always say, find the corners, find the straight edges. Some won't answer it because they'll be like, he's going to say something dumb like flip the pieces over or something like that. All those are really important steps. They're not the most important first step. The most important first step is looking at the picture on the box. Once we understand what the picture on the box looks like, then we can begin to assemble the pieces so that the image on your box comes out. I then make the point that I truly believe this, the most undervalued aspect of working with competent financial professionals is not simply the investment piece. That's what you already expect. It's helping you to clarify what the picture on your box looks like. And how do they do that? Through personal experiences they have themselves, or many times because your financial advisor has helped other people like you in similar transitions. They may be able to share with you some things you might want to think about differently, or some things that you wouldn't want to change. And it's that kind of insight that we think makes the difference moving forward. And it's probably one of the most commented things we get back from those clients who will come up to us and say, that's exactly why we love working with this advisor. So again, that idea of clarifying the picture on the box, seeing around corners, using AI to do it in all the realms that we talked about on the podcast today, that's what we're out there to do. I have a team of 8 that actually does presentations on behalf of advisors at their special events. And we're happy to teach advisors how to use the content as well. So however we can help, we're accessible through our Hartford Funds distribution team out there in the field. And we'd love to work with you.
So advisors, contact your Hartford wholesaler in your territory to access John and his team for educational materials for yourself and yourselves and your clients. And then, what Dr. Joe, you just said, just hit a note with me in the sense of what a differentiator that we could provide to our clients, not just the ones that need the care, the older clients, but also the children and the grandchildren that are taking care of their families, right? In terms of how to be different than the next financial advisor down the street. So, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough. This is an important topic for our firm, for our clients, I think for the industry, really. And I don't think there's been enough attention put on the work that you guys have done. and other folks like yourselves. But I think this is a really important topic. It's very timely, I think, in the age of AI and the trend of longevity and people wanting to live healthier lives as they get older and living longer. So thank you very much. And I look forward to, I haven't met either of you in person yet, so I think I'm really looking forward to meeting you both and having that opportunity. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hers and his, three's company too. Come and dance on our floor. Take a step that is new.